Hey all you Vespa fans, this is Robot here from Vespa Motorsport here in San Diego, the dealership for new Vespas, and scooterwest.com for all things both modern and vintage. Whether you're looking for accessories, parts, anything, we got you covered. Give us a call. All right, on to the content of this video. It's not 2020, but I have the 2020 Vespa GTS 300 HPE. You could see my first review on this scooter. And as I promised, I have plenty more videos coming out with this bike. Now that I've had 2 weeks with it, I've been able to take it to the dyno. So I'll tell you what, the dyno doesn't lie, but it does disappoint sometimes. My brother worked at a dyno shop and he always said the dyno just disappoints people, especially the motorcycle people. They think they got 200 horse and then, But pretty much a dyno, if you're not familiar with it, it's pretty much a treadmill for a motorized vehicle. You wheel it up there, it tells you what the horsepower is at the wheel. So I want to do a test and see how the 2020 HPE equipped motor that definitely does feel like it has more power does against the 2019. Also did some tests with different mufflers on it, and needless to say, it does make some minor improvements. So the first bike we're going to wheel up on the dyno is this 2020 in the pretty awesome yellow. It's a bone stock bike. We're doing all these tests on the same dyno. The traction control system off because it doesn't even function when it's on the dyno, which the 2019 has a traction control system as well. So ASR is off. The tires are inflated to the factory specified pressures on both bikes. And since we're doing this the same day, same outside temperature, same humidity, same dyno, very few variables. So we're doing this the same time, and let's go over to the charts and see what they have to say. So next we're going to put the stock 2019 demo bike up on the dyno. Keep in mind both the 2020 and 2019, they do have some miles on. I'm not putting a bike that just came right out of the crate and holding it wide open on the dyno. It's for a short time, but let's run this scooter up on the dyno and see what it does. Keep in mind, both scooters, I run them 3 times, 3 full throttle runs, and we'll see what the best run is. Fortunately, each 3 of the runs, they're very, very close. You know, it's very minor variables between us, mostly on how you get on the throttle when you start sampling with the dyno. But let's get this up there and see what it does, and we'll get to the charts and pull this up. So off to the dyno room. So here we got the stock 2019 and running this on the dyno. As you can see, it's pretty exciting. I mean it, pretty exciting. Running the stock 2020. Not much to see here. Pretty much you just hold the scooter wide open and you end up with a chart like this. This is the peak horsepower of the scooter versus miles per hour. One thing about motorcycles, usually you chart horsepower versus RPMs. Can't really do that with the automatic scooters because they don't hold a fixed gear, but it works pretty good. You can see 3 different color lines. Let's talk about what everybody's excited about, the 2020. So the green line is the 2020 HPE. You can see it makes a good amount more horsepower, about 11 or 12% as advertised, which is good, all the way through the range until it hits 75 miles an hour. You see the chart just drop off like a waterfall, a really steep waterfall. Well, pretty much at 75 miles an hour is when it hits the rev limiter. And the red line is the 2019. You could see it makes, you know, about overall about 2 horsepower less. In some areas even almost as much as 3 horsepower less. But it doesn't sign off until pretty much a little over 82 miles an hour, which I've always known. Pretty much all the Vespa 250s and 300s prior to 2020, they would sign off at 82 miles an hour. And that's the rev limiter, around 9,600 RPMs. FYI, the 2020 also has a rev limiter at around 9,600 RPMs, kind of indicating that the variator is the limiting factor of the top speed on this scooter. Just for shits and giggles, put the blue line in there. Guess what that is? A GTV 250 from 2007. You can see it's not too much lower power than the 2019, but kind of gives you a baseline. Unfortunately, that chart was stopped at 80 miles an hour, but it does go a little further. And with any of these motors, you could see the last amount of speed from 65 miles an hour to 75 miles an hour on the 2020, the horsepower output drops. So the peak horsepower is under the rev limit, somewhere in the 8,000, 8,500 RPM range. So if you're trying to tune a variator, shoot for that kind of range. Unfortunately, I just want to keep this simple. I didn't put the torque charts or the fueling. You can sniff the exhaust as you're running a dyno. For our next run, we're going to take the stock 2020, we're going to put the Akropovic pipe on there, run the scooter around for a while so the adaptive fuel controller will adjust to the pipe. We're going to run it with both the baffle in it. Sounds similar to this bike. Sounds pretty good, not too loud, and along with the baffle out, which is much louder. And we'll see what we get. So here we go with the Akropovic. Once we do these runs, it's absolutely noisy, especially without the baffle installed on the pipe. Moving on to the dyno chart. You'll see 3 curves. I zoomed in quite a bit because we're only talking about a 2 or 3% gain over a stock 2020. Not much of a gain, but that's pretty typical for just a bolt-on exhaust system. Red line's the baseline, 2020 with the stock pipe. Blue is the Acro with the baffle still installed. And the green is the Akropovic with the baffle out. 19.57 peak horsepower versus 18.95. Actually, it's a pretty impressive chart. Some bikes you put exhaust on, the horsepower drops. That's how well engineered pipes are these days. So for our last bike, we took a GTV for a customer that's in Las Vegas who wanted all the Malossi goodies put on. So we put the cylinder head, the high compression big bore cylinder, the fuel controller, including some tweaks with the fuel controller to get the fueling perfect. And we're gonna roll this up on the dyno. Let me show you what this does. All right, running our customer's bike. We're also dialing in the fueling. You can see a copper tube going up the muffler. So we're sniffing the gas that's coming out of the muffler to do some tuning. As for the chart, I just have the horsepower graphed. You can see the blue line is the Malossi equipped 2019. It kind of makes the 2020 look slow. Can't wait to get a 2020 as I suggested and tune that. I bet you it will make even more. So the peak horsepower with one of those Malossi setups, you're looking at 21 horse at the wheel. Pretty impressive for a Vespa scooter going through an automatic transmission. The thing to keep in mind with scooters, they're constantly putting power to the ground versus if you looked at the dyno chart and we're shifting a bike, you see drops and spikes because every shift you're dropping the power output. So the scooters, the power that they put at the wheel is more effective power with the automatic scooters because you're putting nothing but pure power when you're holding it full throttle. There's no shift lag or any sort of that nonsense as you would have with a standard automatic transmission or a standard shifting transmission. Red being the 2020 stock, green being the 2019 stock for reference. So you get a good gain. So if you have a 2019 or prior GTS 300 and your buddy just bought a 2020, don't worry, just bolt those parts on and you'll still beat them. And they're definitely a lot faster. See the pants as well. Take a look at the description. I have all the specs of the Malossi equipped GTV 300. Kind of gives you a reference base point of what we're working with. So what do you think? Are you impressed? Or are you disappointed? Are you disappointed that the top speed is a little bit lower on this 2020, even though it makes 12% more horsepower and, from what I understand, 18% more torque? The dyno numbers definitely don't lie in what Piaggio claims, nearly 12% more power. What do you think about the Akropovic? It's about 3% more power. That's barely noticeable, but it is additional power. What do you think about the Malossi kitted bikes? Still the king of power. just basic bolt-ons on a 2019. I can't wait to get one of these and start tricking out. I can see making another 5 horsepower on top of the 2019 once we rework one of these heads and put a high compression cylinder kit, probably the Malossi kit. I don't know, too new to find out. I haven't had one torn apart, but I'll get there before anybody else does for sure. Hope everybody liked that video. Like I said, the dyno doesn't lie, kind of gives you a good idea, but the best dyno sometimes is your butt and how fast you're moved by the scooter. This is definitely a better scooter for the roads. Just if you're looking to do top speed in its stock form, needs a little bit of help there. I think with some basic Variator tweaks and tunes, you'll be able to get there, get the same top speed as the 2019. Of course, I'll have a video on some simple mods, such as a Variator kit or up gear kit on getting the top speed back on this bike without sacrificing the power off the line. One thing about the dyno and these automatic scooters, no matter how you tune them, it really doesn't show up on the dyno. The dyno just kind of shows, you know, how much power you're putting to the ground, whether it's at higher speed or low speed. The way we graph these scooters is power versus speed. Motorcycles, usually you leave it in one gear, second or third gear or something, and you do power versus RPMs, so you can kind of figure out what's your shift point, where the peak power is. The scooters always have a very, very flat wheel power curve because they're staying at a fairly constant RPM. Just something to keep in mind, they're a little different when you're dynoing versus looking at a motorcycle dyno chart. In many ways, they're much better than a motorcycle because when you're full throttling one of these scooters, the variable transmission is just keeping straight power, the peak power to the road. And of course, you can move that power around by tweaking the Variator weights, clutch, all that fun stuff. So you could feel the apparent power a lot better to the ground, in turn getting better acceleration and hill pulling power and putting the power where you want it. On the other hand, you could tune it where you get better economy. I would say the way these are tuned from the factory is a good compromise between good economy and decent power. Until next time, check out all our other videos. We have well over 400 of them, over 50,000 subscribers now, one of the biggest YouTube channels relating to Vespa, mostly modern Vespa. I'd like to do a lot more vintage Vespas. I'm quite the vintage Vespa fan. But check them out, subscribe to our channel, hit the little bell to get notifications, especially if you're interested in these new bikes, because I'm doing a lot of reviews of the latest GTS 300 HPE with the latest updated engine. Pretty exciting for me. Maybe I'll get one. Time will tell. I'll look at the Super Tech probably in a week or so, do a video on that. Follow us on Instagram, Vespa Motorsport. Follow me, Robot Vespa. Until next time, Robot here. Keep the rubber side down, ride safe, and Vespas forever.